theoretically, like, we're doing identity. And there's a lot of humor, should we say, in the UK around identity at the moment. It comes from a big fight that's going on around trans identities and what transgender means. One of the great funny comments is that people will say things like, I identify as a penguin, or I identify as an attack helicopter. So we'll get back to this headline, but I think one of the main reasons that Nicole and Tina and everyone else wanted me to talk about identity is because I've already done a Creative Mornings. The last time I did a Creative Morning, I looked like that. That's the last we need to know about it. I have a really strong sense of creating identity. I have a really clear idea of what it means to create your own identity, create your own self. I like these photos because I look fantastic in both these photos. That's the main reason we use that slide. I have a different slide which shows that sort of trajectory, because in my time at Google, obviously that's been my period of transition. You can see me starting as a contractor when I was very young, because I've been working at Google forever. You can see the bit where I got really fat because I ate all the food. And you can see, like, the world's worst security photo, you can see me kind of reaching this other place. And I want you just for a moment to think about the identity that you create for yourself, who you are, what you wear, even working from home. Like, we have to put on some clothes. Like, everything about us is identity. And we could, of course, talk about, like, brand identities today. Like, I love that. I mean, we could talk about tech brand identities. I have a kind of minor obsession about Facebook and Google and Apple and how they present, how they create that identity. I have a complete obsession with the internet and how people manufacture and create identities on the internet for themselves. I think that there's a very curious thing. I've had to put a thing in for my boss in my Instagram, which says Instagram is not real life, because I think he thinks that I basically wander around wearing fancy clothes, which I don't. And also we create an identity through our work, right? Through who we are. And this is a cartoon by a friend of mine that I just really love bringing up, because it's my career path. And it really starts with that idea that when I started working, or whenever I have been working, I have always done the thing that I've been asked to do. I think that's quite a good, important part of a brief, is to answer the brief and do what you're asked to do, but also understand that within any brief or within any creative situation, in almost any situation, the person or people asking you to do something have a limited perspective on what is possible. They have a set of expectations. You will know this if you pitch. You put together the thing you know they want, the thing they didn't think they want, and then the thing you really hope they don't choose because you can't deliver it. And actually, if you can really nail that thing they don't know they want, eventually you start being asked to do the thing they know they don't know. And a lot of my work is about exploring that space, doing the work that people don't really know that they didn't know. I often work with, and have worked over the last 10 years with, a lot of different cultural organizations doing a lot of different projects. That Creative Mornings talk is still up. It's I can't watch it, or at least I have to mute myself, because it's such a very, very peculiar thing to do. To see a different you, to truly do that. This whole thing where people are sharing photos of when they're 20, and I appreciate some of you probably are 20, on Insta at the moment, is amazingly troubling. Like, well, like when those 20-year-old photos of you are so profoundly different. But that was a whole and clear brand identity. I had a very, very clear sense of who I was. I might not have been terribly happy with it, but I was representing it. And now I feel like I'm represented a lot through the work that I do. So we do these kind of kooky, weird projects which use the digital and use the internet. And actually, I'm not really going to talk about them too much. That sense of standing on stage and talking about it does not guarantee how people are going to respond. These are some of my favorite comments. I did not have to Photoshop this at all. I just scrolled down a little bit, and that's pretty much what people think of it. And that's fine, right? Like, I can't control what I'm presenting. I could give them what I think they want, but I'm not sure that is what I want to do. What I want to do at every opportunity I get is do the thing that I don't think they realized. I don't think they knew they wanted. So I don't know if you dialed in this morning wanting to see lots of pretty pictures or projects or videos, but we're not going to do that because I got this chance to talk about identity. Nicole said, if you still want to do that, that would be great. And I have a lot that I want to talk to you about your work and about what we're doing as creatives in everything we do, even now, even when we're fighting to find resources, even when we're fighting to find business. I feel so much for anyone running their own agency at the moment because it is tough. Advertising budgets are just disappearing. It is a really tough time. I don't have solutions for that, but as Nicole said at the top, it is also a really interesting change state. No one would have expected that we would be doing this right now. This is a time when you can actually begin to challenge your ways of working, their ways of working, everyone's ideas about what is normal and what is okay. Those are up for grabs right now. And I think that's a really important time to get hold of. So yeah, I want to talk about how we help, how you define people, how you as creatives create that identity for other people. I picked a few films. I know it's not a particularly filmy audience, but like, you know, this is how we have over the last 30 years defined autism or dissociative identity disorder or transgender. Like, I love it when non-trans cis people make films about trans people featuring or cystic fibrosis or cerebral palsy or other disabilities. These are the stories that we tell that then actually ultimately define to a large extent how people without a voice to define themselves get seen, just like in the comments. So it's incredibly important, the stories that we tell and the work that we make and how it matters. Part of that is because, as some of you will have seen this, I've been using this slide for a really long time because it actually just does the thing that I needed to do. And I'm pretty sure that when I drew it, I didn't think I would still be using this sketch 4 or 5 years later to talk about gatekeeping, to talk about the way in which the model for information, for our truths, for our reality used to be incredibly gatekept by the publishers, by the means of distribution and publication, i.e. by the TV stations, by the radio stations, by the broadcasters, by the newspapers. They very much defined how we understood our world. If you wanted to get information, you had to go to a library or you had to pick up a newspaper. It was a lot easier for us because we could create these identities through this very limited frame of advertising or brand advertising. That's how we did it. That was the whole point, was that we had a broadcast mechanism where they couldn't really find other alternative realities. And then the internet has come along, and actually we have discovered to a large extent that we can pick and choose our version of reality. You can actually take lots of different perspectives on the same reality, which you can very easily see if you go to the States and you choose to watch right-wing media and left-wing media trying to discuss and trying to come to grips with what is happening in that country. And it's an astonishing dichotomy because they are so far apart that you can really clearly see that. But actually we have the same in almost any part of the world, which is that people's reality is informed by what they receive, by the information they receive. I mean, we could get into like again, I do really like neuroscience. I'm quite big on it. Like, like how you receive information. You've all had that thing about like, I wonder if the blue that I see is the same as the blue other people see. And I personally have spent most of my life trying to work out whether, I wonder if everyone understands the world the way that I understand the world. And it turns out they really don't understand the world the way that I understand the world, but it took a really long time for me to get to that point. This like, obviously this kind of, you'd have thought, obviously, unless you really believe that there is one true reality, that there's a sense of truth, and that actually all of this information does, all of this filtering does, is actually just slightly skew your perspective. Actually, what we're really talking about is that your perspective is your reality. Well, you see that in newspapers, and how they choose to do top line story. It doesn't really matter what this story is. You get a certain amount of authority. I get a brand halo from the Google part, and then my words maybe get given a different meaning because, or different like value or weight because of the way in which it's been framed. And just as easily they can put this headline up. And the really important part about this is that you know that the blah that I say as a mentally ill trans woman is of a different value. It means something completely different to the blah I give you as a creative director at Google. And yet, if we go back to reality, like, those two statements are totally true, right? I am a mentally ill trans woman and I'm a Google creative director. So a lot of the work that I do around identity is about disclosure, about standing up, because weirdly it's only through representation and seeing people that you understand the degree to which these differences exist, and they exist around you. It's quite extraordinary. So I've done this weird ass thing, if you think about it, of just kind of telling everyone exactly everything, like the fact that I've got a blood condition which makes me unfortunately vulnerable, which I was rather annoyed about, that I've got gender dysphoria, which is like the pathologized version of what transness is about, that I'm face blind, which is a peculiarly comic thing, which means that I don't recognize people, and that I'm autistic, which is news to lots of people because I didn't tell anyone for an extremely long time, but actually makes a lot of sense, apparently, that I have a dissociative identity disorder, which is mental. It's great. It's like, yeah. I mean, I know everyone's having a tough time. I'm trying to get Google at the moment to talk about, when they talk about mental health, when we're talking about Are You Okay Day, when we're talking about mental health month and all of that sort of stuff, and the fact that everyone is struggling, to understand that there are people struggling with an environmental health issues and mental health issues, which are about where you are, and then chronic health issues, at which point you basically want to tell everyone else to fuck off. So we do a lot of work pride. And I think it's really important to understand the value of those people, of those different people. Like, Greta's autistic and she's quite open about that. And it's really important. Like, it might be hard to imagine someone without that unbelievable focus being as single-minded as she is. That problem hasn't gone away. Let's remember. I think that from an identity point of view, that whole movement faces new problems, right? If you were trying to deal with how to brand the environmental movement coming out of the back of what we are experiencing right now, and say, oh yeah, we've got to go through that all over again forever, but with a few other things. Anyway, I think it's important to note that these things are not God-given gifts. They are, unless you're really into God, they're not specially acquired skills. They are things that your brain can do, and this is a whole talk. I mean, I'd love to do, like, come do another talk. We can talk about these skills that you have. This thing that people talk about, cognitive bias, is really valuable, because just for filtering, just think about the sounds you can hear right now. Think about everything else, all of the other information, all of the visual noise that's around you, anything that you are busy experiencing and filtering out. Spatial awareness. One of the reasons that these talks are so strange, or if you're giving them, are quite tiring, is actually because of the change in your understanding of what you're doing in regard to where you are. So the reality, that physical reality of our thing, which computers really don't do very well. Syntactic ability, our ability to use and play with words, our ability to dream and imagine, our ability to be scared, just the very fact that we can sense all of these things simultaneously. The idea that sound moves faster than, or light moves faster than sound. So the things you see and the things you hear are not actually, you're not sensing those at the same time. Your brain is constantly having to process all of those things. Here's a chart. I hope you like charts. I know it's probably not a very Creative Mornings thing to do, but like there's a chart, it's got a thing, it's got a curve. This is a distribution curve. And this is this idea of a normative curve. So this is what normal is. And the reason it matters is because, if we go back, like we really need to think about what, you need to really think about where we sit in that curve and why we are always so obsessed with normal and common and typical. Normal is a statistical term. It's actually a maths term. But we do everything around hitting those audiences, hitting that curve. Like, and I know this is a bad joke, but we really need to flatten that curve because there's a lot of people outside it. In fact, everyone is outside it. Our version of normal is simply what you are trying to be. So everything is about what we're trying to be, and everything we create, all of our creative, all of our stories, all of our messaging is about trying to find normal when really the normal isn't a thing, it's an aggregate. I don't know if everyone knows this little experiment. It's an experiment in machine learning about how machines can learn to identify objects from scratch. So no one told the machine what a hammer looked like, and I don't think I'm helping here much by drawing my hammer, which actually looks a lot more like an axe now I come to think of it. That's probably a Freudian thing. Toilets I struggled less with. That seemed to go fine. It's amazing that just like people, the machines build their own inventory, their own syntactic understanding of what the world is. And in that sense, a neural net is very like a brain. It is basically comparing and contrasting with lived experience. It's lived experience of what a blackberry looks like becomes its idea of what a blackberry is. And if it hasn't seen something or it doesn't understand something, then it stops being that thing. So the reason that this matters is because actually, like, here's a nice flat curve. Like the internet, what the internet thinks about bananas is so normal that actually even the curve looks like a banana. It's quite hard to draw a banana and the machine not think it's a banana. But then we had this very curious thing, and this came out of it literally came out of the experiment, which is that people drew shoes, and to begin with, the same curve happens, right? So that everything's a shoe. But actually, some people's shoes are terrible, like, and you can't work out what they are. And they're not a shoe. That doesn't look like a shoe, so it's not a shoe. Like there's one down in the corner over here, like it's below normal, where you're like, that isn't a shoe. That looks more like a cucumber. And you end up with that weird sense of like, okay, so the internet has a whole problem with my shoe, because my shoe is so little drawn that it's outside of the curve. It no longer thinks that my shoe is a shoe. And that's what's happening. It's like, it's not that that's not a shoe, it's just that that's not what people draw. That's not what people think. That's not what's normal. And because we're teaching our baby internet what normal is, that matters. Because it's very strange, because actually if you go and look at what the internet says about shoes, it says something completely different. So you might not realize that this is a problem, because weirdly, when you listen to what the internet says, it's plain old sexist. Literally every shoe is high-heeled. Our boots are high-heeled. Our sandals are high-heeled. It's weird. A flat shoe is actually distinguished from a high-heeled shoe. So I love the idea of a man's shoe. Like, I need to tell some of my friends about that. Okay, so there's a whole world of stuff going on there. There's a whole world of kind of like basic sexism. There's a whole world of like inference. But that's what the internet is saying. So when we look at our emojis, we can clearly see that as humans, we are saying that a high-heeled shoe is definitely a shoe. In fact, it's the most common kind of female shoe. But when we through ourselves, through our actions, tell the internet, and I mean there are millions and millions of drawings in there. It's a big old data set. I think it's called Quick Draw. Someone asked, but it's called Quick Draw. Oh, there you go. Someone's put it in there you go. Brilliant. Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, like I think there's a really important thing for everyone to remember here, which is that there is a fight going on, and the fight goes on between the data and what we are telling people, and that actually our representation is really important in creating data, in creating opportunities. The data is never accurate. It's never true. It's not a thing. You can't have true data, just like you can't have a true reality. The data, just like we're looking at that very badly drawn circle, is about how you choose to look at that information. That's why we draw that circle. It's informative, and most importantly, it's normative. So normative and normativity are words which is a word that I wish was in more common use, because when you look at what you're doing as a creative, and whenever you are working, and this is mainly towards people working with clients, working with agencies, working within companies, you will be pushed towards normativity. If you think about what you wear, if you dress for work, you are being pushed towards normativity because they want you to dress and behave a certain way. I don't actually fit terribly well in a corporate environment. It turns out, because I'm not very good at that normative quality. And it's the same analysis that you should bring to anything that's happening. Because the reason it matters, and when I'm talking to geeks, I generally talk about public access data sets, because that big set of shoes is a public access data set. That's what it is. Anyone can access it, and it will tell them what a shoe is. But if I'm a shoe in that data set, it doesn't matter how many humans know I'm a shoe. The system and the decision makers, like the things that are making decisions, I'm not a shoe. I don't exist. And if I'm not a shoe and I don't exist in their system, and yeah, you can substitute any minority in. You can substitute women in for shoes. I hate to say it, but like actually when we talk about that stuff, women are still unfortunately underrepresented, and actually our identity is misrepresented by the internet, and we know it. So how do we fix that? But you can talk about sexuality, you can talk about gender, you can talk about race, you can talk about religion, you can talk about almost anything within certain data sets. You can talk about like the non-white Western people, all of my lovely privileges. I get to use the internet, so do you all. Have a flick through the screen, see how many of you are white. Like, we are creating the internet because we create the content. I know it's not fair. What can we possibly expect you to do about it? And that's also how I feel. Like, it's not like I run Google. They barely listen to me. But you do what you can do, right? This is a project that was started by a few women in New York. I think it's really fantastic. And it is started by a few people. Like, they created the posters, like it's called Women in the Room. You should go and check it out. They've got like a load of stuff which is like just a little bit more brassy. Like, understanding that there is a problem and showing it to people is the first step in solving a problem. You cannot solve a problem if you do not demonstrate that there is a problem. And there are a million creative ways to do that. Sometimes, especially when the data doesn't exist. I think I just wanted this because I'm so in love with both of them. But I like, okay, so not everyone gets to do this kind of stuff. although actually Phoebe Waller-Bridge was working on like one-person shows not that long ago. So if you back yourself, there's a chance. The thing that I like the most about this show, and I don't know if this is aware to everyone else, when I talk about new normals, does everyone acknowledge that like it's got 3 female leads and they're all bisexual, and no one really cares? It's like, that's great. Like, that's just not so I would love to see a show in which there are 3 guys who are all bisexual, and they all play off each other, and they all, you know, that would be cool too. But I think it's really interesting that that's totally normal in this show, and it's totally accepted. Confront them. This is a Toscani. I'm sure you all know your advertising history, but Toscani and United Colors Benetton did amazing work in this space of like the first kind of what we might now call shock advertising, but really at the time was like understanding the problem, which is that people could not even see the problems. This is an advert that definitely wouldn't run now because the Olympics would absolutely demolish you for trademark blah blah blah. But like, it's brilliant, right? It's in the middle of the AIDS crisis. I think it's about 1990, and it ran as a really interesting way of making you think about coming together, about maybe it's about athletics, maybe it's about the way in which athletes behave at the Olympics, who knows? But it does kind of confront issues. And if you want a new version of that, then, you know, it's not hard to find them. Like, we could have put a load of things into this deck about how you do this. And yeah, no, we're not all Nike. We don't get to do that, but we get to do it in our little ways. And the last thing I guess is that we have to believe. You have to believe. You have to have faith in change. One of my favorite adverts that did that for me was the Superhumans campaign. And I have friends who are disability advocates, and they fight a little bit about this. And we've literally done on stage fights about whether or not this is the right kind of inspiration porn that we should be presenting. But like, they are legitimate and they are amazing. And the way in which that was presented in 2 successive campaigns was astonishing. So the most important thing to remember is that even if you think you're a guy or a girl, like, who knows? I managed to go through most of my life without realizing, without even knowing that I knew. And I did know. Like, I knew when I was 3, I thought all the little boys changed to little girls because that had to be what happened. And then somehow you managed to change what you think. You managed to distort your own reality. It's amazing what your brain can do to you. But the most important thing about that is, like, you can do it. Like, no one's in charge. I mean, they really aren't. All they're doing is giving you guidelines and pushing you towards norms. And the reason for that is because nothing is kind of like actually, all the laws and the monies, look at what is changing right now. We're in a real interesting fluid change state where things that we would not have imagined a month or 2 ago, 2 months ago, I was thinking back to Mardi Gras and thinking, wow, the decisions I was making then, just like, they have nothing. So when we say society is a construct, and yeah, it can fall apart. Everything's adaptable, and it's up to you. Like, I know however new you are to your career, that's something you can hold on to for your whole career. And if you haven't been doing that, then why not? Tell your friends they're brilliant. Just remind them, especially at the moment, and just remind them that everything they've got is extraordinary. And try not to be what they want you to be. I don't know how to say that in a nice, normal, corporate way, but like, there's no point. We've got plenty of people who are normal. We don't need normal. We need people who can not be normal. So you do you, and good luck, and thank you very much.
Wow, T. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, T. Can everyone please give a round of applause, show some jazz hands, fist pumps. T, that was incredible. Wow. Thank you so much. Yeah, wow. In the comments, we've got a lot of like, thank you, T, thank you, T, thank you, T. So guys, we've got about 10-ish minutes for Q&A, and afterwards what we will do is for those that want to stick around and discuss and debate, we're going to do some breakout groups, but right now amazing, I'm seeing the comments coming in, T. Wow, thank you. So right now what we're going to do is some Q&A. So if you guys have a question, please go to that participants little icon at the bottom and raise your hand, and if you raise your hand, I will see you and we will have a question for T. So, okay, Helen, I'm going to unmute you and you will ask the first question. Okay, Helen. Helen, you're unmuted.
Hi, Helen.
Thank you so much. That was such a great talk. Lots of really good insights, and I loved your openness as well. I wanted to ask, as someone who's sort of seems very successful in your career, how do you think that we can sort of nurture a culture of neurodiversity in the workplace? What can we do to make that better?
I think creating umbrellas for people to be themselves. I think actually what's awkward is that, especially in the workplace, people are difficult, and people genuinely don't think that they have. It's very difficult trying to get people to understand that you've hired them because of who they are, rather than because you want them to make slides. And sometimes that's a challenge to allow. I find it very peculiar the way people walk through the door and then you suddenly think and begin to make decisions in ways which you wouldn't as a human. You will literally create material that you as a human would put straight into the recycling bin, and yet you think that's okay because like that's the point. And maybe there's some data that demonstrates that that is the point, and actually you get like a whatever it is, a 0.7% return on that advert. But like there are ways of allowing people to exist, and a lot of it is about creating umbrellas for them to feel safe. So my career is basically about creating safe spaces. I have repeatedly, and you only really realize it when you're looking back, just basically consistently created safe spaces under, and when I have been safe to be a bit not myself. And I do think that actually male privilege was a huge part of that. I think it would have been much harder, actually. So I think certainly anyone running a team or running a business, like finding and allowing people to be themselves, not to disrupt, but just to acknowledge that we don't all think the same way, and that it is possible to bring that to work, and that actually there are some benefits to that, is the hardest part, because we talk about it. It's a bit like the inclusion. I mean, it is inclusion. We started talking about diversity, and then we started talking about inclusion. It's like, yeah, it's great to be diverse, but then you've got to kind of include them, which is a chore because they're weird, or they don't come from where we're coming from. You know. And then recently we've got to equity, which is like, not only do we have to have them there and actually include them in the conversation, they have to, by they I mean all of us in a way, have to feel like we have some equity, we have some relevance. So however big your team is, you can do that. That is something everyone can do. And I think that's really the first step towards nurturing it. But it is difficult because, you know, I'm not an easy person to work with, it turns out. Maybe it's easier from home, I don't know.
T, thank you. We've got another question for you from Stephen Duke. So Stephen, I will unmute you and you can ask your question to T.
Thanks, T, for the great talk. You talked about how the information we consume helps shape our own identity, but I've got my podcasts, I've got my Twitter feed, and I can feel that shaping my own identity. What's the advice you have to like maybe break free of that and get into some other forms of information to give me kind of a bit more freedom?
That's a really good question. Like, the scariest thing ever for me personally, from a personal identity perspective, was that idea that having not told people something for 30 years, having genuinely said, like, I apparently only ever told one person that, as all of this information came out about me, so I didn't really have a choice, which was helpful. So I think in a weird way, the best way to do it is to not really give yourself a choice, because you will always kind of, this is a safety thing again. It's like we create our boundaries, and challenging those boundaries, the way we often try to do it is by creating other identities, and then living through those identities. So certainly within my communities, there's lots of people who live through other identities online where they don't have to represent sort of physically quite so much, and that allows them to explore within a again a relatively safe space. But if you're looking at that idea from being out there and being public, like it's quite hard to build brand or build identity when there's a lack of authenticity to it, when it is ultimately a test account, a sock puppet. And we know that because we as humans, this is this other thing we all do, we all think that somehow when we go in there, we build these like cool creative campaigns, and we think, yeah, everyone will get that because everyone's an idiot. But then actually we go home, and even if we like it, we still understand the difference between real, pretend, and play. There's a whole thing about child psychology, which is another space which I think people should get into, and how children learn and what they think of as normal and how we get to that stuff. That's where we understand this difference between real, pretend, and play. How we understand that there is a face behind the things, like that sort of object recognition, that kind of relative space. Those things are different in different people. And it's the same with any identity or any work that you're putting out there. It's like some people will buy it the way it is and the way it's presented, and a lot of people will, I don't want to say smell it out, but it's an interesting thing, right? We talk about it from a senses perspective. We talk about smelling it. It doesn't smell right. Or having a smell test or gut test. We're not using our gut or our smell, but we definitely are using something to create a sensation. And we understand that sensation. We feel it in our gut. Very strange. I love the way we use those kind of very human metaphors for something which is clearly happening, but we just don't have language to describe what's happening. So we pretend it's something to do with our belly. Anyway, I hope that helps. Sorry.
Thank you, T. No, that was fabulous. So guys, it looks like there are no more hands up. If you have a question very quickly, now's your last chance. Oh, okay, we have one more. Yep, okay, Leash. So I will unmute you now. So
you have hands.
Go for it.
Hi, Leash.
Hi, how are you? I'm broken my wrist, which is an interesting one to do in COVID when you have to raise your hand so often.
Oh.
My question is around which comes from what the previous gentleman said. All our identities are constantly evolving. You know, I've been working in brand identity for a long time, and I've always believed that, you know, before the why comes the comes who you are, because who you are drives your why, you know, and it gives you the fuel for your fire or the inspiration to create the change of what it is that you want to bring into the world. And yet, you know, we've come from a world where brands, you know, they keep on going, oh, it's not on brand. And it's around that, you know, we've built static brands. And you know, so my question is around the moving forward to really maintain authenticity. We have to allow the brands to evolve as we do. And just wondering if you have any comments on that, you know, as we evolve and grow and change, become more of who we are.
Yeah, I do. I think it's I mean, my personal perspective on this is like it's a consistency thing, and also a willingness for brands to age, which is such a strange notion for them, and they seem to really struggle with it. Like I don't understand why Google thinks it's still a startup. And it's not. It's basically a very large utility company that employs like 100,000 people. And it's a utility company. And so we have these very curious things where you have to take the responsibility that comes with aging. You have to, yeah, there can be a fluidity, but there's also not a sense of it's not like, well, one of the classic examples is under new management, as if somehow under new management changes the building, changes the people in it, changes the structure and its location. It's like an enormous amount of this will remain the same. You can convey certain parts, but yeah, the who, I love it when brands construct their who out of who they want to be. That's like a teenager. I mean, it is a very teenage thing to do. Like, I constructed my identity basically on the basis of what the people around me who I thought were cool. I was like, that's cool, I'm going to steal that and I'll have a bit of that, and I love the way they do that, so yeah, I like the way she laughs, so I'll laugh like her. Those things happen a lot, and brands do it too, which is weird, and you're kind of doing it because you can't see, you don't really want to be the thing that you are. Yeah, there's an artifice to all of that stuff, which is like, it's a lot easier to have a brand if it's rooted in core qualities. It's and it's a lot easier to change if things are rooted in core qualities, because you're looking to some ideal archetype and some ideal of who you are that doesn't change. Like, there's parts, I don't know, we can get into a really weird conversation about it, because I basically have a multiple identity disorder, so I genuinely have some different identity issues. It becomes a strange thing, I think, to control, but effectively every brand thinks that it has that kind of dissociative identity disorder. Every brand has different parts, and at different points different parts want to represent themselves because that's who they really are. And the challenge, maybe it's why it's useful to have people who understand how fragmented identity and performance is. The challenge is to allow all of those to understand that they are somehow the same. Yeah, and if I knew more, I'd be making more money.
T, I'm just going to jump in there. Alish, thank you for that beautiful question. T, it's now 10 a.m. on the dot, so we will finish the Q&A now. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to you for your time and your creativity and your thoughts and sharing yourself so beautifully. This has been, I didn't actually believe we could pull off an event.
I think, yeah, you've been like, well done, because I know how terrified you were, like absolutely terrified.
You guys have no idea. It's been
well done for you.
So,
I think it's important. Well done.
Well, I'm so grateful that we got to do it, and the fact that we're doing it in this realm is insane. But we did it, and you guys are still here. There's 128 people still here, and so much love to all of you guys. So unfortunately we do have to finish the Q&A, but what I would love to do is we have this incredible artist on the line, and Bill has been drawing the whole talk, and we'd love to see what he's done. And there we go. Bill, can you talk us through it? Look, guys, look what, so Bill has been drawing, and we will share Bill's talk on socials, but Bill, take it away. Show us what you've done.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you so much for that talk, T. It was really fun to draw. So I started off just doing a bit of a summary of where we started with everyone calling in from all around the globe. We had the Side Hustle 60 with Brown Paper Wines and LC Beats, which is fantastic. And then we had that beautiful performance from Riza. And then T began her talk, going through all sort of the numerous hats she wears and discussing creating identity and what that means in the internet age, talking around the current trend of the 20-year photos, how her job has kind of become to explore those unknown unknowns within companies, discussions around projecting diversity and how we can choose our own sort of media reality in the internet age. There's a really nice comment around sort of activism through disclosure about being more public with one's personality, sort of reworking that, flattening the curve into sort of flattening the normal curve. I really liked that line around normal being an aggregate. Then there was a great discussion around sort of how machines are perceiving the world and how we sort of are creating reality, sort of what is a shoe as understood by the internet, and drawing to explore sort of the perceptions that we have.
Amazing.
Then some discussion around sort of how we can fit into a misaligned system and how we can sort of recreate the world in our more unique images. And then just landing on that note of just having faith in the change. So that's the whole drawing together. And
Wow.
again, thank you so much. It was really fun.
Wow. Bill, we're jazz handing you a lot. That's incredible. He can just do this on the fly. It's such an amazing skill. So, Bill, if you want to stop sharing your screen, we will get you guys all a copy of that beautiful drawing. Again, thank you to T, thank you to the volunteers, thank you to everybody.